I'll start with you, Darren. Please allow me to call you Darren.
Absolutely. You've called a lot worse, so Darren is fine.
Thank you so much for that. So please tell us about yourself and about Talent in the Cloud and what you're doing as a business.
Great. Thanks, Lorraine. Hi, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here this morning or this afternoon. I'm currently in just outside of Cape Town. I've been in South Africa for about 7 years now. I've been working across the African continent for about a decade. My background, as Lorraine mentioned, my first career was as a chef. I still have the scars to prove it, but that was many, many, many years ago. And the last 22 years, I've been involved in the world of staffing, specifically around technology. And over the last 7 years since I founded, well, 6 years since I founded Talentinthecloud, specifically around fintech. So we support a number of fintechs across the African continent. We do some work outside of Africa as well in Europe, but they tend to be bigger players that are looking at Africa as a new venture and a new horizon. As I mentioned, I'm based in Cape Town. I've got offices in Mauritius, London, and here in South Africa. Team is now fully remote. I'm sure we'll cover some remote working and uniquenesses around the last couple of years a bit later on today. But yeah, so that's a bit about me. All of our clients are fintechs, as I mentioned, either payments companies, challenger banks, remittance companies, or organizations providing services specifically to that sector. So that's a bit about me. Anything else you'd like to know, Lorraine?
No, that is brilliant. And while Googling you, like I said, the chef is something you could not find online. No. But I discovered that the efficiency of your talent capture systems, which is a part of your service, and you'll give us more information about it. It cuts up to 71% of the recruitment process. And as a HR myself, I'm impressed, and I would like to know how have you embedded technology in your business, and how has that enabled you to provide services across Africa and internationally, all the way while based in Cape Town?
Yeah, so I think to put some context around that, from little old Cape Town, we've provided services in 31 countries over the last 5.5 years, and that's not having physical presence in any of those countries. I think 18 of those are in Africa. So technology is really at the core of the business, but it's a very fine balance because we're in the world of human resources and humans, people. You can't fully automate recruitment. Believe me, many people have tried and are still trying, but it just doesn't work, not yet. I'm not saying it will never get to that point, but there's a very famous story about Amazon that tried to use AI, and the issue with technology like AI is it almost forms biases for you. So what happened with Amazon is it looked at their internal staff complement and said, okay, well, there's a higher percentage of men at Amazon, so clearly, the algorithm needs to say that we need more men because that's what we've got at the moment. So there's a very fine balance between human and machine. And that's really what we strive to sort of achieve in terms of how we've managed to significantly reduce the hiring time frame. Again, we work at the top end of the market, so we're talking at sort of senior director level and upwards predominantly. One of the biggest issues is availability of people to conduct interviews. That tends to be a big bottleneck in anyone's process. We were using video when Corona was still a beer and wasn't a virus. So we were using video a long time ago, and we found that really does speed up the process. And it's not just what we would call an asynchronous video, which is you getting your phone and answering a few questions. This is a live interview that we do with our candidates, working with our clients to understand the sort of questions they want answered. So effectively, what we've managed to do is take out the first part of that process, the first interview, and conduct that digitally. And again, because we're working across so many different countries and different time zones, it's proven hugely beneficial to our clients. So that's the sort of the thing that speeds things up from our clients' perspective. I think talking about technology, we do use a bit of AI in the business, but very, very carefully, because it's not quite there yet, nor is any sort of machine learning when it comes into human capital. But what we have done, when I say we've got technology at our core, all of our business is inbound. So we don't have a sales team. I've never had a sales team at Talent in the Cloud. All of our business is either done through digital marketing, it's done through referral, or is done through sort of networking and various different sort of elements like that. But again, using digital technologies and digital content, that's been a real key for us. And I think that's really what's got us into the position that we're in, and we're fortunate to find ourselves in at the moment.
Thank you so much, Darren. And it's very impressive to learn that your business went digital way before the virus. And we find ourselves in a situation where now to survive, you need to have a digital presence. So thank you for that.
Pleasure.
So back to you, Darren. While you're operating, beyond your country or beyond your station, I'd like to learn, are there licenses that you need to, to trade or to do your business globally? And then what policies and pricing decisions do you make when you offer your services?
It's quite a short answer. Sorry? There's a bit of background, but it's quite a short answer, and the answer to licensing is no, not really. We're not a licensed industry, so we don't really need any sort of licensing to do what we do. However, some of the challenges that we've had to overcome, which is probably worth talking about, when we were initially a UK-based business, it was becoming increasingly difficult to get client funds from Africa into the UK. It was very, very difficult. We had to go through all sorts of hoops with compliance and with the banks and regulators. So we looked at sort of winding down our UK operation, or at least just keeping that for Europe, and setting up another legal entity. And we chose Mauritius because of the ease of doing business into Africa. So that was something that we did about a year and a half, nearly 2 years ago now. And whilst not cheap, it's rather expensive to have an entity in Mauritius. It does serve its purpose, and it allows us to get a free-flowing funds from across the continent. So that helps. I think some of the other challenges are things like withholding tax in the various different African countries, and just navigating through that. But again, the trade deals between Mauritius and the rest of Africa is again very favorable. So that was one less headache we've now got to contend with. So that was good. In terms of pricing, our pricing is pretty standard across all countries and all regions. It's not overly complex, but again, from where we run a search, a search is a search. Quite honestly, whether it be in Nairobi or it be in Accra or it be in Limpopo, it really makes no difference. So the process is very much the same, and therefore the pricing is very similar. Obviously, we do, where possible, charge in local currency. One of our clients we use to process that's DPO Group. So whenever we need to invoice locally in Naira or in any other currency that's not sort of our core three, which is Euro, Sterling, and Rand, Euro, Sterling, and dollar, and then we can use a payments gateway such as DPO to do that, and that works very, very well.
Thank you for that, and I think that takes the burden off so many service-based industries to learn that it's a matter of doing research. You could find that your service is not does not require you to acquire a license in many countries, like Darren is saying. And again, through research, you get to learn the difference in tax that affects your pricing and affects how you interact with organization within the different different countries. So a little bit of research and the strong will to build a global brand goes a long way. So thank you for that, Darren.
Lorena, just one thing to add as well. I think again, we've been, I suppose, a little bit fortunate in the sector that we operate in, but a lot of our clients operate Pan-Africa. So they'll have a headquarter, be that in South Africa, be that in Kenya, be that in Nigeria, be that in Mauritius. So actually, it's not always necessary to have separate legal agreements and contracts with every single country you operate in, depending on where your client's based. So, for us, again, I mentioned DPO Group, that's been our longest standing client. We have one central invoice to them in their Irish entity, and that covers pretty much the globe. So it's not always necessary for you as the supplier and the service provider to have a license in all those jurisdictions. As long as you satisfy, the procurement requirements of your customer, then that should suffice. I just thought I'd add that.
Then I want to go back to Darren, and I recognize that Africa is called a young nation. We have lots of youth. And it's estimated actually by 2030, for example, we'll have 30 million young people. As a talent management expert, how do you think the job market will accommodate this? And what's your firm's role to address this?
That's a big question. Okay, let me see if we can unpack this a little bit. So I think there's a huge number of youth across the continent. And it'll be interesting to get some stats on, what that youth is doing in terms of education, what sectors they're focusing on, and if there are, a strong percentage of those that are focusing on the digital economy or the digital sectors. Okay, so I've got the grasp of digital skills. I'll work on the assumption that a percentage does, because I can't talk broadly enough across all sectors. That wouldn't be my place. But I think if we look at digital skills and we look at how that's going to impact workforce, I think it's going to be a bit of a double-edged sword. And I'll explain why. I think, first of all, it's fantastic for the youth coming through, because the opportunities now are not just based in their country of origin or their city of origin. Okay, if they can acquire the skills, they're now able to market their skills globally. And we've seen that happen over the last few years. We've had Andela that have made a big impact across the continent. We're seeing Google and Facebook, the FANGs. Actually, it's not Fang anymore. It must be Mang, because they've changed their name. But the Facebooks of this world and the Googles and the Amazons. I mean, Amazon is setting up a center here in Cape Town and want to employ like 5,000 engineers. So we're seeing a huge demand now for digital skills, and I think the world, or the Western world, has woken up to the fact that there's amazing talent here on the continent. Amazing talent, right? So I think that's one of the key things. There is a downside to that. And what we've seen over the last 2 years after, during and after COVID, is that it's causing a bit of a remote brain drain. And I've spoken a lot about this over the last 18 months or so. And what I mean by that is, historically, you will find it's a bit of a famous saying: if you go to any bar anywhere on the planet, you'll always meet a South African. Well, that's true, right? You'll always meet a South African. But what we're seeing now is that companies are saying, in the West, are saying, you know what? You don't need to relocate. You don't need to come to the Netherlands. You don't need to come to London. You don't need to come to San Francisco. You can be based where you are. Don't have to uproot your family. You don't have to go through the stress of relocating, because it's very stressful. I've done it 3 times with a family. It's not fun. We'll pay you the grading. We pay all of our engineers regardless of where they are. So you can be sitting in Lagos working for Google and earning dollars or earning pounds or earning euros rather than earning naira. That's going to make you a lot more wealthy, without a shadow of a doubt. It's going to give you exposure to different tools and different working cultures. And because a large percentage of tech firms are now remote, it's really lowered the barrier of entry. So I think from an African tech community, and I'm talking about employers here, I'd be worried. I really would be worried, because I'm now not just competing with my local competitors. I'm now competing on a global scale. And I think Anne mentioned earlier, when she was looking at, or when she outsources various different parts of her business, there's always a commercial aspect to that. There's always pricing, right? So I'm not going to go and outsource my web development in London. It's going to cost me an arm and a leg. But I can, maybe look further east and get a much better deal. And I think that's going to be a challenge here in Africa. If I was an African fintech certainly, although they tend to have a lot more money because funding seems to be going crazy at the moment. But if I was a general sort of tech business in Africa, I'd be concerned, because how am I going to compete against these big players, these big international players? Maybe that gives you some context.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you. I think it's been very clear, and you've segued into my next question for you, which was to ask that now that after the pandemic, we've seen people working from home, and we've had this, sometimes you work from home, other times you need to go to the office. So this hybrid sort of work setting, is it something that you feel like in the HR space, it's something that will be embraced by employers? And as a person who supports women in fintech, what cross-border opportunities do you think will be available for them? And I'm sorry if you've already mentioned this, now that they're working remotely.
Okay, I'll answer this in reverse order. I think with the opportunities now for women. So as you mentioned, I do a lot of work in gender diversity across the continent and Europe as well. I think, again, if we look back over the last 18 months to 2 years, back in, I lose track of the dates, where we 2021, back in 2019, I think it was something like 43% of the leaders we placed in Africa were women. Okay, so 43%. If we look at what it was in certainly in 2020 and 2021, it's almost half of that. Now, what's the reason? I think one of the fundamental reasons were, I'm talking here to a group of women, so please, if I'm speaking out of turn, please correct me, okay? But I think women generally are less risk adverse. Sorry, more risk adverse than sort of males, and a lot of women have found themselves in quite a difficult situation during the pandemic, where it was kind of the better the devil, even if I wasn't necessarily happy in my job or my company. You know what, we're not going to rock it now, because who knows what's going to be around the corner. No one knew how long the pandemic was going to last for. So we certainly saw a decline in numbers there. So I think there was definitely a sizable shift. However, that's definitely recovered over the last 3 months. I think the last 3 months, it's been about 54% of the hires we've made have been women, and that's in leadership positions. So we've certainly seen an upward curve, which is fantastic. So I think there are more opportunities. I think the one thing that the crisis or the pandemic has done for all organizations is make them understand that you don't need to be sitting at your office from 9 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock in the afternoon and be tied to your desk. I think it's given a lot more flexibility to employees to say, you know what, if you need to go and pick the kids up from school, go and pick the kids up from school. If you need a doctor's appointment, go to a doctor's appointment. I think there's become a lot more flexibility, and I appreciate there are some companies and some countries that it's still quite conservative, and they still expect, for you to come in and be at your desk from 8 o'clock in the morning and, have an hour's lunch break. But I think by and large, where, going back to my previous point, how a company is going to compete, you need to start looking at your whole value proposition for your employees. It's not just about, I can pay you another 1,000 naira a month, or an extra few $100s. It's actually, what's their working environment? Do you have flexibility? If I need to go and take my child to the doctor, am I going to be made to feel guilty for that, or am I, or is that completely fine with the business? So I think there's a lot of softer elements that are starting to come through. We're seeing certainly I wouldn't necessarily call it a demand, but almost an expectation now, where one of the first questions people usually ask is, well, how much is it going to pay? What's the salary? Now it's like, well, okay, talk to me about the culture, talk to me about the environment, what's it like? People are a lot more conscious and cognizant of that now. So I think that's made a big difference. And I can't see that changing anytime soon. I think there will be hybrid. I don't think a lot of organizations are set up to be 100% remote. it can be quite difficult. We went through that transition. And up until 2 weeks ago, I hadn't met half my team, and we're only a small company, right? So I had literally hadn't met half my team, which was bizarre. So, now the restrictions are kind of lifted. We can go and travel a bit more now, still being careful. But, will we ever have one office with 50 people in an office? No, that just won't be our model moving forward.
Wow, very, very interesting. And I like that you explained the advantages that have come with the pandemic, because it's something that has really disrupted most of our lives. And I had it being called the COVID Kairos. And as much as women suffered from what we call the unpaid care work, it's nice to know that now the flexibility in the workplace shall allow us to be moms, wives, as we do our jobs. So it's good to have such advantages. And thank you for being a champion of women, Darren. We appreciate you for that.
My pleasure.
Darren, thank you for holding on in this forum. I would also like for you to give your final remarks in the discussion.
Well, I think that with the African Free Trade agreement in place, when that really does start to get some traction, I think it will open up a lot of opportunities for people. I think that it's important that, as you mentioned a bit earlier on, Lorraine, do research, make sure you understand what the requirements are when you're conducting business in different countries that are outside of your own. You can get a nasty shock when you suddenly get a large percentage of your invoice discounted because of withholding tax that you've not factored in. So I think there's a lot of very smart, knowledgeable people, as per this panel today, who are there to help and there to advise. So I think, make sure you do your research, as Anne was saying a bit earlier on as well. Building networks, making sure. Sorry, it wasn't. Apologies. It's important to build your networks and to understand, who's vital, who's key, and who can really help you navigate what are quite complex, environments and quite challenging places to work.